Welcome to USA Biz Party, the chat after the chat, the party after the party. I want to welcome you to joining me today as we do this live with my very special guest. Well, before I go into that, I just have to tell you, I was reading his new book and it sounded like this guy was reading my mail. I don't know about you, but when you find a book like that, you just absolutely have to get in touch with the author. So our very special guest is, Jeffrey Shaw. And the reason I hesitated there is because I want to read his bio to you because it's just too much to remember. Okay. So he's a small business consultant, entrepreneur, coach. He is an acclaimed portrait photographer. I wish we could go deeper into that. Maybe he'll share a story or two related to the self-employed life from that. He has the very popular Self-Employed podcast, as well as being a TEDx speaker, author of Lingo, and now author of The Self-Employed Life. Please join me welcoming to the stage, fast becoming my friend, Jeffrey Shaw.
Hey, Ann. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So we met through my daughter, Stephanie. She runs a grow retreat. And unfortunately, because of COVID, didn't work out for you to join us this year.
I know.
And I was so excited.
I was excited I was coming, hopefully, not excited I didn't go.
Oh, yeah, no, I was excited about you coming.
I know, me too.
But that's another great book for people to pay attention to. So whether you're, just a second here, if you're joining us live, please say hello in the chat. We'll post your comments on the bottom. Or if you're in the replay, put an R. Let us know that you're here. I go back, I look at the comments, and I interact with you. So I'm really thankful for all of the people who are with us live and for all the people who are joining us on the replay. Now, Jeffrey, when you and I first spoke, we were talking about your book, Lingo, but you've developed this absolute passion for small business owners, particularly those that we call self-employed. How did you come to have that passion for people?
Yeah. It's what was really important to me is how the books fit together. So I wrote Lingo. That Lingo came out in 2018. And I actually was intending on writing another book, kind of a follow-up to Lingo in a way. But then I was deeply moved by this idea of writing a book for self-employed business owners because, often in life, the most obvious thing takes us the longest time to see. The fact of the matter is, I've been self-employed my whole life. I've actually never had a traditional job. I've never received a paycheck. So it suddenly occurred to me that there just wasn't a good resource book out there for self-employed business owners. And it's important to make the distinction between self-employed and small business and entrepreneur. And I go into that in the book, and perhaps we'll talk more about that. But I really wanted self-employed business owners to take ownership of the term self-employed. So I had this idea to write the book. But to be honest with you, Ann, because I know I'm going to write several books, I'm going to be a serial author, if you will, I wanted to make sure this book fit in with Lingo. So I contacted my previous editor of Lingo, because Lingo was self-published. The Self-Employed Life is with a publisher. So I worked with their editors. But I reached back out to my previous editor and asked her if she could see the connection. And here's what she said. She said, Lingo was a brand message strategy to create the environment for business owners to attract their ideal customers. The Self-Employed Life is a book to teach you how to set up the environment for the results you want in your business. And that's the connection. So for me, I really felt like I wanted to write this book to address what is fundamentally, I think, the biggest problem for self-employed business owners. Every self-employed business owner I've ever asked throughout my decades in business why they started their own business, everyone has the same answer. It's some version of, I wanted to control my destiny. I want to control my future. I want to control the hours I work. To which I say, how is that going for you? Right? And we know how it's going, right? It's kind of the myth of self-employment because it ends up looking nothing like that. Whether you're struggling to get your business off the ground, you're feeling consumed by your business. If you've been fortunate enough and your business is a huge success, you're overwhelmed with keeping up with it. But in either case, it's nothing like you expected. You didn't really gain control of your future. And that is a core problem. And I wanted to address that problem. And I felt like I had a solution. And the solution is what the book is all about. The solution is what I call the self-employed ecosystem. It's an understanding of the three core elements that you need to have a fully operating and thriving self-employed business. And you might want to dive into that more, but I'm going to kind of wrap up the answer to that. But that's why I wrote the book, because it just, and to that point, I actually, in doing my due diligence, I went to Amazon. I did a lot of research online, like what other books were out there for self-employed business owners. And they were all about taxes, boring taxes. How do you pay taxes when you're self-employed? How do really boring. There was nothing that actually was reflective of what it really feels like to be self-employed, which is why we called it the self-employed life. It wasn't just how to. It is the all-encompassing life that we experience when we're self-employed.
I agree. And when I first read the beginning of the book, I realized there's a quote in here. I want to share it. So I have this book with me. I love it when I can do this. And there's a quote, and I actually put it in Twitter. And okay, so let me find that quote.
I love it when people pull quotes from my book, because I'm lucky if I remember what I wrote. It's just like a 1.5 year gap between writing it and being it published. It's like, I hope I remember what's in there.
Oh, I've embarrassed.
I'll remember.
By saying this was in your book, and he goes, "It was."
Exactly.
But this is what, you mentioned that a lot of people go into self-employment, small business, they're becoming a business owner to take control of their destiny. Some people think it's about making more money, so I'm more in control of my money. As a self-employed person myself, there were many, 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 many times when I felt like I wasn't in control of the money, that I was, that it was going out faster than it was coming in.
Yeah.
Those times are the times that you get on your knees and pray. But this quote, I think, really captures the essence of self-employment. And it says, and you wrote this, so just so that you know, you did write this, okay? What motivates us most is the desire to become bolder versions of ourselves. So what motivates us the most, it could be money. Yeah, a lot of us go in because maybe we're having difficulties with our job, things aren't going well, we need additional income for whatever reason, family crisis, putting kids through college, or just so that we can have more stuff. But the bottom line is that a truly dedicated self-employed person is working to become a bolder and more, a better version of themselves, which leads me to another question, which is, what are some success characteristics of the self-employed life?
And one of them is that, if you look at the root of motivation, as we know, I assume many of us know this, that intrinsic motivation is what sticks, right? Extrinsic motivation is really hard to stick with it. So if you're becoming self-employed, you're in it for the long haul. You're all in. So the extrinsic motivators, such as money, fame, whatever the extrinsic motivation, it's honestly, and it's not enough to carry you through the tough times. It's just not. So that brings up the question, then, what is truly the intrinsic motivation that inspire someone to go into business for themselves, which is anything but the easy road. I would say I used to say this as a photographer, like, never does someone wake up in the morning and think, I'll become a photographer because that's the easy road to riches. Being self-employed is not the easy road. So what on earth would motivate somebody to go stick with it, go into it, and then stick with it? And I believe that what really inspires people to stick with it is that it is a never-ending journey of becoming a better and bolder version of ourselves. And that just keeps us going because we learn more about ourselves. We are challenged to go to the moment we're bored, we're going to find a way to challenge ourselves and go to the next level, right? So a truly inspired self-employed person it's this never-ending desire to become a better version of ourselves. So I think one of that to me is a very, very strong characteristic. As I often say, being self-employed is like personal development on steroids, right? So there's a real characteristic to wanting to be a better version of yourself. Then there are other common characteristics. Resilience is certainly a big one. If you're going to be self-employed, you're going to have a characteristic of being resilient, growth-minded for sure. But the one that I think is probably less obvious and very, very practical, and I think it's important to stress, is your most successful business owners will tend to be highly attuned to what's going on around them. And that is more important today than ever because the world is changing so quick. So, for example, we're just on the tail end of lockdowns and pandemic, and the whole world's values have shifted. What was important to people, what people thought was the most important thing in the world a year and a half ago may not be nearly as important to them today. But vice versa, what people were taking for granted a year and a half ago now has great importance. So when the world shifts like that, and as I often say, this is my third rodeo. I've been in business for 36 years. I lived in New York City and was running my business in New York City during 9/11, and then of course the Great Recession, and here we are again. And in every case, there's a major shift in what people value. And when there's a shift in what people value, there's a shift in what people want and desire in the marketplace. So a characteristic that I don't think is spoken about enough is that your most successful business owners are highly attuned to how people's values and lives are shifting and shift their business accordingly. Either, as I often say, to kind of put yourself on the right side. Perhaps it is that you need to evolve a bit in order to align with what people are valuing today, or often there is opportunity to step into a bigger market than you may have even had a year and a half ago, because what you do, maybe you were a little ahead of the curve, but what you do has more value to people today than it did a year and a half ago. So it's empathy for sure, right? Part of it is empathy, being highly sensitive to what people need. But I also think from a practical sense, it's just being highly attuned to the market. And that's, I think, more important today than ever, and will continue to be important because you can so quickly become irrelevant in today's market because things are changing so quickly. So I think certainly a success characteristic is paying really close attention to those that you serve and how their lives are changing and what they need today or what they don't need.
I think that's a really important point. And as you were saying that, I was thinking of stores. I mean, big, big stores like Montgomery Ward, JCPenney's, Sears. Some of these have just not been able to make that pivot, that shift to meet the customer where they are. And I want to thank you. If again, you're watching us live, I know we have somebody watching us on Twitter. Thank you so much. Please feel free to comment. Let's see if we have a comment there. Not yet, but the self-employed life is so powerful. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I was going to say, I love that you brought up Sears. Like, Sears to me is heartbreaking, because they're such an American company, I mean, to me, they just didn't evolve into what middle America represents, and they could have. I think they really missed. It kind of breaks my heart because people, if you look at the history of Sears, I mean, there used to be Sears homes, right? I mean, they were steeped in kind of American values, and they lost that, and it's a shame. You also, as a lot of people did last year, a lot of people using the word pivot, and I tend to suggest that we think about it in the terms of evolving, because a pivot may be too sharp. A pivot may seem like too big of a challenge. Really, what it's likely to be is an evolution of your current state. Like, what can you evolve into? And I just think, particularly for self-employed business owners, I like to suggest that they think about it as evolving, so they don't feel like they're changing directions, because again, that just feels like a lot of pressure to change directions or completely pivot. It's likely to be an evolution of what you're already doing.
I like that there's that subtle difference, because pivot was a huge word last year. It was like the concept, like, oh my God, brick and mortar doesn't work today. So now we have to shift all the way over to something new. And there were companies that did well through the pandemic. There were other companies that had to go through the growth that you were talking about. And then there were other companies that simply could not make that shift.
And there are a lot of people feeling the pressure of pivoting. I mean, if you look at like restaurants, pivoted, if you will, to offering different levels of takeout. They changed, instead of paper menus, the QR codes. They changed a lot. But you know what? It's likely to be that those things are going to stay. Even as speaking, professionally speaking, right? All events went virtual, right? So they pivoted to virtual. And as we're moving back into live events, a lot of events are keeping a hybrid model where it's part live, it's part hybrid. So that's the difference. Like, because when we pivot, we think we're eventually going to pivot back. But if you look at it as an evolution, you're going to evolve into something else, and you probably have expanded your business. I think a lot of restaurants have the possibility to do. I know here in Miami, a lot of restaurants are doing even better because they expanded the opportunities with more takeout. Right. So, yeah.
For sure. And that leads to really actually our next question, which is, we're talking about a success mindset, but with success is never one. It's never an easy road. You earlier said that you didn't wake up one morning and go, oh, I think I'll be a photographer so I can get rich fast. I know you had struggles. I know, reading the book Lingo, I love your story, how you learn the language of the people that you wanted to reach. But what would you say are the top 3 challenges that self-employed people face that they need to address in order to become successful?
Yeah, I'd say the number one challenge is that everything's all over the place. It's also the number one thing people say to me when they reach out for coaching support. They will almost always say, I feel like I'm all over the place, or I feel like I'm a hot mess, or I have all the pieces, but I can't bring it together. And it's no wonder, right? If you think about the existence of being self-employed, we're not compartmentalized. We don't have departments as a corporation might. We're wearing the proverbial 1,000 hats. We're doing a lot of things ourselves. But I think one of the core problems that's not really been addressed, which is really, it's a part of the mission of the book, is to address this problem, is that typically we have to hire coaches for our mindsets and for support. We have to hire marketing specialists to help us with our social media and our email marketing. And then we take courses on YouTube and different trainings that we want. And then we belong to peer groups and masterminds, and we go to conferences and on and on. Of course, we feel like we're all over the place. We're literally having to run all over the place to get everything we need. So what I've done in this book is bring together those elements of personal development. That's what the self-employed ecosystem is. The 3 big components are personal development, business strategies, and daily habits. So this book hopefully brings everything together in one place. You're going to get I've received over 1,000 hours of training as a coach. I've been receiving coach training since 2008, I think it is. I can't even count how many hours I've coached people, right? So what this book includes is years and years of coaching people. It is the media section is the business strategies. It is chock full of very specific marketing strategies that people can apply in their business right away. And there's a whole section on daily habits, like what can you do on a daily basis to create a consistent mindset and to keep yourself going? Because no matter how much you try to solve the chaos, it's inevitable. There's still going to be ups and downs. So you need consistent mindsets so that you don't get derailed. So what I've tried to solve in this book is and what I think is probably the biggest problem when you're self-employed is that we're not compartmentalized. We don't have departments. We have to run all over the place. I don't know if there's another book out there like this that has as much a blend of business and personal development in one book. It's pretty unique that way, but that was very intentional. Second big challenge we spoke of. I mean, it's the feeling of the lack of control. We go into being self-employed thinking we're to gain control and find out that we can't, or we think we can't. And we lose control of the hours. And next we know the business is running us instead of us running the business. And again, it comes down to what's the environment you can set up so that it doesn't have to be that way. Because at the end of the day, we can't control an uncontrollable world. But what you can do is create the environment for the results you want. if you put everything in place, if you don't feel like you're all over the place, but you bring things together in a systematic way, if you feel like you've got the right mindsets, you've done the personal development work, you're using the right business strategies, you bring all that together, that create that environment, you're giving yourself a 99.9% chance of success, right? So that's how you control the uncontrollable. And I'd say the third biggest challenge for self-employed people is that they're going it alone. Early in the book, I break down the different terms: self-employed, small business, and solopreneur is one of them. And there's different reasons why I favor different ones. And in the end, obviously I'm pointing out that I really want self-employed business owners to take ownership of self-employed. But when it comes to solopreneur, I flat out say, please don't. Please don't refer to yourself as solopreneur, because nobody achieves big success alone. And you energetically don't even want to think that you're solo. But that is also one of the biggest problems. Flat out loneliness, right, is a problem for a lot of self-employed business owners, because they're in it alone. Businesses of one. They may not have the support unless they're coaching with somebody. They may not be receiving the support and the partnership and the thinking partner that you need. It's also feeling like, you're the only one experiencing what you're experiencing, which is of course never true. But we go on social media and everybody else looks like they're doing better. So there's the comparisons that we put ourselves through. So I'd say, just going it alone is a big challenge, and it becomes a bigger challenge as one's business grows, because you can only go so far alone. At some point you're going to be hitting a wall, and the only way of getting to the next level is to hire other people. That's when you really need support. It's one of the most typical things that I see happen to a business. They've grown it as far as they can on their own, and they're just hitting a wall. The only thing that breaks through that wall is you have to delegate, you have to bring other people on. And of course, it's an investment. The reason people don't is they always say, well, I don't have the money to. There's a point where you actually accept the reality that you can't afford not to. You can't afford not to invest in the support that you need.
Exactly. And I have so many more questions for you, Jeffrey, but I also know we have a time limit because you have another commitment. But before I let you go, I want to read some of the chapter headings for people so that they can see some of the value that they'll receive. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up the banner so that, oh no, I did not do that. Okay, that's all right. But you can go to the selfemployedassessment.com. Is that right?
Yes, selfemployedassessment.com. It's actually a really cool tool. It'll ask you 6 questions, and your answers to those questions will deliver back to you a customized results of where you're weaker in your ecosystem that you need to apply some work.
So we'll add that into the comments and into the description. But again, I just wanted to share some of the content here. So the self-employed ecosystem, personal development. So get out of your own way. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And what moves you forward. The business strategies. And I think that's a powerful one for a lot of us, because we all tend to know we need to strategize, but we're so caught up in the day-to-day, the everything. So embrace hug marketing. Can't wait to get that chapter done. Create an emotional journey, which I think is related to your book, Lingo.
It is. Yeah.
Build a business model of multiples. That one sounds interesting too. Set up systems for success. Develop loyalty, advocates, and referrals, and spread the word with podcasts, which we invited Jeffrey so he could do that with us. And finally, daily habits. And I love the idea of daily habits because, again, some days we wake up and all we can think of is all the fires we have to put out. Yeah. We have to have that foundation to establish. I love how you put that we need to create the environment that leads to the results that we want, and the daily habits do that. Any last words before I have to let you go on the broadcast?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm thrilled that people are reading. It came out May 4th. It's going really well. People are getting the content. It's unique. I think it really is always the biggest compliment when somebody reads a book by an author. Certainly for me, the biggest compliment is one, like you had said, when people feel like it was written for them. I've heard that repeatedly. And I was like, that means a lot to me, because the fact of the matter is, I am you. I am my reader. I am self-employed. So it means a lot when people read a book and say, gosh, it's like you wrote it for me. Well, yes. And thankfully, it's, I did, because like I said, there's no other book out there written specifically for self-employed business people. So when it comes to the business strategies you mentioned, for example, they're what I refer to as right-sized business strategies. They are business strategies that are right strategies for relationship-based businesses, not transactional businesses. And most self-employed businesses are based on relationships. Right. So these are marketing strategies that really focus on building a relationship, and hug marketing and emotional journey. It's all about ways that a self-employed business or a small business can build deeper relationships to create the loyalty and referrals that we need, because every customer or client matters when you're self-employed.
Very, very true. Very, very true. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and I did get that banner put in. So go to selfemploymentassessment.com to get your personalized.
It's self-employed assessment, not to just so they find the right self-employed. Yep. Self-employed assessment.
That one out.
That's all right.
Okay.
I respect you doing it on the fly.
You are too kind. You are too kind.
Self-employed assessment.
And we'll scroll that. We'll ticker that.
I'll tell you what, I'm big on buying domains and redirecting them. So I bought the wrong spelling of assessment, because I assumed a lot of people were going to leave out one of those S's. So, right. Even if you misspell assessment, it's going to direct you to the correct place, because I just felt like the word assessment is just too challenging. There's too many S's in there.
There are. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you. Tomorrow we'll be on Clubhouse. I think you're going to be with me on Clubhouse, Jeffrey.
I will.
Awesome. So we'll be on Clubhouse discussing more, getting into some of these questions deeper. And we'll be on Twitter Spaces at the 11:30 tomorrow morning Eastern time, if you care to join us then. Again, thank you, Jeffrey. I'm already finding the book extremely valuable. Excellent. In that I have found myself in the first chapter already.
Excellent.
And thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you. Bye.